viewers, and welcome back to the South Main Auto Channel. We got us a 2004 Honda Odyssey here that is a Honda don't, meaning it don't run. Mrs. O said this thing was dropped off yesterday on a trailer. Evidently it's had the head gaskets replaced. I think it was a DIY job. Best of my understanding, I haven't spoke to the customer myself. Replaced the head gaskets. It sat for like 6 or 8 months, I guess. I don't know, after the repair or somewhere along there. Probably irrelevant, but now it doesn't run, and I guess they haven't had it running since they've done the head gaskets, so here it is. I had some guys come down from my brother's shop and help me push it in, because me and Mrs. O didn't have enough beans to push it in, but we'll see what she sounds like here. Oh boy. Well, that doesn't really sound good, folks. That is your classic dead hole. Yeah, baby. Woo! Look at that. Got a fancy air intake there. So that sound when it was cranking over, I think we've heard a lot of this in other Honda videos where there was actually a burnt valve, or other videos in general where you crank it and it has that pretty distinct, sound where, you hear, 4 or 5 pistons contributing and then one that doesn't, so the starter kind of freewheels past it. Of course, lots of variables here. First thing, because it's the easiest thing to do, we're going to check the mechanical timing on this engine. I'm not even going to bother doing a relative compression test. My ears are plugged, but I can hear that it's not right. And being that it just had head gaskets, I guess we can cross our fingers it's just a timing issue. Hopefully it didn't crash the motor if the timing is off. Well, lady, I hate to tell you. So let me move the light here. Hopefully we can see this. So our cam timing mark, hopefully you guys can see it there, the dimple on the cover, and the number 1 is lined up there. And then we'll go back here to the rear head. Honda's always good about this. And then we look through there. Hopefully you guys can see that in the mirror, the little pointer in the bottom of the cover there. That's lined up with our mark. However, I'm not seeing the mark down here on our crankshaft, so we should have some notches right there in the end of that pulley. I think like a couple red marks and a white mark, something like that, right at the end of the pointer. So it appears to me that cam to cam, the timing is on, but the crank timing must be off, whether it got lined up initially with the wrong mark or what, I don't know. The damage is done. They've already cranked the vehicle over. And I'll tell you right now, when I bar this engine over by hand, you can feel it hit the valves. It actually mechanically locks up, and you can hear it hit the valves. I'm going to see if I can find the marks on the crank pulley down there. Right now the motor's locked right up, and then you can spin it past. Then it locks up again, and I believe that's our marks right there. Yeah, so we're on. I see the 3 notches. Let's see here, see if I can get it to spin past a little bit. Yeah, damage is done here. Some junk, fellas. It's gonna have the head's pulled back off it. When they lock up like that, that's usually not good. I'll show you the marks here on the crank pulley. We'll see what we got for marks here. It's a number 4 cylinder. Not sure what they got going on there. See if I can at least identify the marks here for you on the crankshaft. I don't know what could have went wrong here in the process, but it ain't good. Hopefully these will focus and show up for you. See the 3 little notches, and then we've got the other white notch there back by the pointer. That's what we're looking for. Obviously with that lined up though, our cam timing marks are off, and just barring the engine over by hand, you can tell, it's binding up, hitting the valves. You can hear the rocker arms tink when you crank it over there. at this point, I'm not going to go any further with it until I talk to the customer. You know, we can, you know, if they want to know 100% for sure, did it do any damage? The only thing we can do is pull the timing covers, take the timing belt off. At that point, we can, you know, use our cam gears, you know, flick it over, do a leak down test on each cylinder to see how much leak down there is. But being the engine bar is over so hard, obviously the car's already been cranked over, you know, even prior to coming here in an effort to try to get it running. You know, if it only takes one time, you know, that's why we always preach, you know, you put the timing belt on, you roll them over a couple times by hand to make sure there's no binding. Because if you're doing it by hand, you know, you feel it, oops, that doesn't feel right, you stop, realign your timing marks, double check everything. But like I said, at this point, I have to call the customer and see what they want to do. Timing is clearly off on the engine, potentially caused, you know, valve train damage. Being that they just did the head gaskets, I have to actually call and see what they want to do. So here's the deal. I talked to the customer. Of course, he's a little upset, you know, which I don't blame him. He said he just had spent $600 on these heads to have them redone, you know, new valves and everything. So you can't help sympathize for a guy like that. It kind of sucks, but I told him that my outlook, just my gut, no, my big belly doesn't feel good simply because, you know, it's mechanically binding when you turn it over. That, you know, the odds of it have not having done any piston damage or valve damage is pretty low. So I gave him the two options. We can either, you know, just remove the timing belt. I can, you know, spin the cam, you know, one cylinder at a time, do a leak down test on it, see what kind of damage is done, or just line the timing belt back up and see, you know, what damage is done, you know, from there. So in either case, I think we're going to end up having to do a leak down test on it to see, you know, what happened. If it, you know, perhaps it only, you know, trashed one head, maybe both heads, you know, I don't know. It's all speculating at this point. So that's what we have to do. I think, you know, it's a catch-22. I could probably put the timing belt on, you know, just line up the marks just as quick as I could just, you know, take it off per se. So we'll get it up in the air here and I'll see what we can do. Only took a few minutes to knock the covers off so we can see the front here. Hopefully you guys can see this. This is exactly what we were looking at through the little rubber plugs there. We can see our mark there for number one. We got the notch that lines up with the notch in the head. And then we'll look at the back one here. This one's gonna be a little trickier to see. I don't know if you guys will be able to see this. Kind of get the camera back here. Yeah, you probably won't. I'm gonna take my word for it, but there's a notch. Yeah, you guys can see the notch. You have to kind of follow it across to, you know, pretend the number one there on the belt. So that one's, you know, pretty close. Close enough for the time being anyways. I believe that's the only mark on those rear ones. And then we go down here, and here is where our problem lie. The classic double marked crank sprocket. Let me get my stinking light. Sorry about the crappy video. But you can see, so we have the mark up there on the oil pump cover. We have the triangle right there that is perfectly in line with the dot on the crankshaft. The only downside to that is the mark you're supposed to use is that mark right there, the other triangle. So it's triangle to triangle. You know, unfortunately that puts the timing off, you know, what, 90 degrees anyways, all of 90. So, you know, it only took a few minutes to get here. I'm gonna pull the tensioner off. We'll advance the crankshaft there and gear line back up, see what happens. So I didn't show the process of taking the covers off. I don't know if this will make sense or not. I'm not one big guy who's gonna feel like the heebie-jeebies or anything, but there's the vibes, you know, when people are like, man, I got a bad vibe. This car is giving me bad vibes in the sense of I can feel the guy's frustration as I'm taking this thing apart. It's missing the majority of the timing cover bolts. A lot of stuff's broken, bent, not put back, you know, missing clips. I feel the frustration vibe coming off this van's aura, I guess if that's the proper term. Kind of feel bad for them because I mean they're like that close to having it right, but potentially could have caused some, you know, serious damage. We'll find out here in a few minutes. I'm guessing. I don't know the whole story. I didn't talk to him a lot because ultimately, once you know we figure out what's going on, finding out more information really doesn't change the outcome. The other thing I find super interesting is every single bolt I've touched is like loose and falling out. Even this tensioner, I mean, none of the bolts are tight. Most of the timing cover bolts, if they were there, they were super loose. I don't know. Maybe they were onto something, I'm not sure. I don't know. Don't know, but we're gonna find out. Toolbox tour over in the junk drawer. We need to find a grenade pin, which I've done a couple timing belts in my day. But for whatever reason, I always throw the grenade pins back in here, and I've probably got 100 of them. That one's gonna work just fine. So it's the automatic tensioner. Just like the one we did in our Honda 3.5 video. Granted, I probably didn't show how to compress it because we likely put a brand new kit on it. Which, as a matter of fact, I know we did. We put an ASIN kit on it, if I remember correctly. So we're just going to push this in slow and steady. That wins the race. Make sure your holes are lined up. If they're not, you know, because we're going to get it in, we're going to put the pin in it. If the hole's not lined up, try to straighten it up right now. You can stick the, you know, Allen key, drill bit, whatever it is that you're using. But just push them in slow. Yeah, close. There she is. So there it is, fully loaded. Get her worked out to the edge. We'll get that stuck back up in there. I'll get the timing marks lined back up. We'll pull the pin and then place your bets. Of course, we don't know if there's anything else wrong with the band other than this. Whoa. Threw the timing belt back on. The grenade pin has been pulled. Now we'll wheel her over a couple times here. Oh, that feels a whole lot better. There's once. I don't know. Feels like you got good compression on a few holes. Let's see, let's line our marks back up. That's pretty close there. Double check our cams. I drew some marks on the timing belt there so we can hopefully see that a little bit. I know sometimes coming off at an angle with the camera is a little tricky to see the marks. So I'm gonna go back there on that rear one too. You should be able to see that. Lines up, you know, straight across, straight to the mark on the head. So we're good there. Fingers crossed. Before we go cranking it over, I have to put the pulley back on. So I just use the axle nut as a spacer there when I'm turning them over by hand. Make sure keyweight's all good. Put our little belt deflector on there. Looks like she's seen better days. And we'll put our pulley back on. Just want to make sure, you know, timing belt's not going to walk off or anything silly. We don't have to torque it or anything like that. Just put her on there. Now, Hondas usually don't idle too good without the belts on, just FYI. Sometimes they'll have a real lopey idle. But at least this will give us an idea whether or not the whole thing's trashed. Make sure our power steering belt's out of the way. Don't want that getting wrapped up around something here. Tell you what, I'm gonna zip tie that up. I don't want to take my chances. I take it off, but you got to pull the motor mount to do that. So I just don't want it getting wrapped around in the timing components here. So I'm just gonna zip tie the power steering belt over here to the AC line. Keep that out of the way. ladies and gentlemen, place your bets. Wah, wah, wah. Well, it starts and runs, but you can hear it popping through the exhaust. So, I guess with all that being said, we can, at this point, now do a cylinder leak down test. Of course, we'll see what cylinders are firing, what's not. We could probably do a relative compression at this point. Crank it over, see what it sounds like. I'll take and fire it up one more time here, so we can all have a listen again. Stuff leaking all over the place. What do we got? I hear something dripping on my floor. Antifreeze. Where's that coming from? That is coming out of the throttle body. They never hooked the hoses to the throttle body. Yeah, both of the coolant hoses are off the throttle body, so it's spraying antifreeze all over. I'm not going to really worry about that right now. It obviously has a dead cylinder. I wonder, I don't believe these have a clear flood mode, so we can't just crank it over. We'll have to disable the fuel injection, crank it over, see which cylinders are dead. Kind of take it from there. I think what I'll do, perhaps at this point, the best thing to do, we know the pistons hit the valves. We could feel it when we were turning it over by hand. At this point, maybe it's, the best idea to call a customer and say, hey, here's what's going on, or maybe we can find out which cylinders it is and see if it's both heads, and then give them a call. I guess that's probably the best bet. Just thinking out loud here what the best route is. So what I've chosen to do here, we're just going to use the Pico. We're going to do a compression check on the whole engine. I pulled out the number 4 spark plug. I installed the WPS 500, the pressure transducer. I've hooked up to the battery, so we're going to measure voltage draw. Another way to do a relative compression test, instead of using a current clamp, you can also use voltage. They have a special portion of the picoscope where it's essentially going to measure the compression in this cylinder, compare it to voltage drop every time that cylinder, or every time the starter comes up on compression, and then it's going to calculate a number for us and give us our compression spec all the way across the whole engine. Now, I have personally noticed when you're using this portion of it, we'll get this set up here, so we're going to pick 6 cylinders. What I was going to say is I noticed when you're doing this, if you pick a cylinder that's good, the test is usually better, so hopefully we're in a good cylinder here. You can choose to use this test with or without the pressure transducer. This is a 3.5. These are a 10-to-1 compression engine. So there's that. Now, if you're unsure, if you have a Pico and you're unsure how to set up this data, or unsure how to hook up your scope, just come up to the help section, go to about, or not about, don't listen, you go to help and then go to contents, and then you can pick tests, and then compression test, and then you can go right down through. It'll tell you, it'll tell you in this document, how to hook up, where to put your leads and all that stuff. So we're going to click start. Now what I've done is I've already disabled the engine. I unplugged all the coils because they're easy to get to. It wants us to hold the throttle wide open. Now we're going to go ahead and crank it here. I'm going to go full throttle and crank it. Sounds to me like we have at least least one dead one, and we can see on the screen here, pretty decent all the way across. Of course, it's just calculated values. Now, here's the beauty of it. We can go to display raw data, and I don't know if we can move this down, can we? Yeah, we can. So we'll look here on the screen. Now our peaks, our red peaks, that is our pressure transducer. That is cylinder number 4. Now here, when you're looking at relative compression, we're going to be looking at the lower peaks. So it's going to be just the opposite of using your amp clamp, okay? Because you can see here our blue trace is at 12 volts, and every time it comes up on compression, you know, voltage is going to go down, amperage is going to go up. So we'll look at a steady line here. So that one's good, good, good. Cylinder number 4 is good. Right here is our missing event. So whatever cylinder is after number 4 in the firing line. Does that make sense? So this would be, you know, 1 cylinder, 2 cylinder, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then back at 1. And then here's one that's missing, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So all we have to do now is get the firing order. I can't think right now, so we'll just go like this. Here we go. Go right to common specs. I used to take the time to memorize firing orders and stuff, but I've learned don't memorize something you can look up. What did they say? 154236, right? Let's see. 142536. So we can pop back here. We've got 1, 4, 2, 5, 3, 6. 1, 4, 2. So it looks like cylinder number 2 is our 1 with little or no compression. So that was pretty easy. Assuming all the rest of this process data here is correct, we only have a problem on one head. Did it smash the valve? Do they have a valve over tightened? You know, hard to say at this point. But listening to the engine crank over and looking at our data here, I say it's worthwhile to investigate cylinder number 2 based on what we see. Hopefully you guys that have the Pico and a WPS 500 have utilized that feature on it. I haven't gone through 100% and verified its accuracy as far as how it calculates. However, I have done my own relative compression test, had a known pressure in that cylinder, you know, knew that, you know, say cylinder number 4 was, you know, 195 pounds, did my relative compression, took the amperage, you know, cross multiply, figure out your, you know, PSI per amperage, and then you can look at the amperage draw on each other cylinder and calculate it out. And that's pretty accurate. I mean, that usually comes out within, you know, 5 or 6 PSI. I think actually Ivan and I did that in one video, did the calculation and then just verified with a gauge, and it was surprisingly accurate. I assume this uses the same type of, you know, algorithm, compares a known PSI to a known, you know, voltage draw on the starter, and then, you know, calculates the rest of it. Perhaps takes an average because of how long it has you crank the engine over. I think it went to like 8 cycles or something. Yeah, 8 cycles, you know, obviously calculates the RPM, stuff like that, which is relatively easy calculations when it knows when each compression stroke is up and how many times it turned and, you know, time and all that stuff. So I think what I'm gonna do at this point, I'm gonna call it a night. Still dealing with this whole sinus thing. I'm gonna go home, get some dinner. We now have direction. We know, unfortunately, it's on the back bank, because it always is. And, you know, what we'll do, I don't know if we can just sneak that valve cover off there, you know, perhaps pull the valve cover up and see. This engine has me very worried because every single bolt is loose. Even, you know, the spark plug was loose. You know, the coil packs are loose. The cam spry, I went to turn the one cam and the bolt came out of it. You know, it's just, I'm pretty nervous about it. You know, hopefully for this guy's sake, hopefully they screwed up the valve adjustment and, you know, maybe it's too tight. But, you know, when we were spinning that engine over by hand, I mean, it was solid. You know, it was coming up against the valve hard. if it comes down to where he has to pull the head off, you know, what do you do at that point? Do you pull the front head? You know, what if it nicked the edges of the valves? You know, I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'll save our data. I'll put it in the link in the description box below so you guys can go in and check that out. Hopefully you understand it. But it definitely makes a whole lot, you know, it shortcuts your whole process here, because we pull one spark plug, do the whole thing, know what cylinder's bad, and move on with our day. And we'll pick up on this tomorrow, so see you guys then.